Welcome back to Pace Immigration, paceimmigration.com, talking with immigration lawyer Andy Semotiuk. Andy, interesting article in the New York Times talking about doctors who are having a problem. They're in the United States on what they call, some of them, of course, doctors born in the United States aren't, but foreign doctors that are on H-1B visas, which are basically temporary work permits, are having problems getting those H-1B visas renewed. They feel like they're in limbo. What's the story?
Ah, okay, that's a difficult problem for those guys, and not only doctors, but for IT professionals as well. That article referred to them as well.
Yes.
But let's talk about doctors first.
Okay.
So they're there, probably doing their residencies or whatever, probably have completed that, and they're en route to a green card. However, there's this lineup, and they have to wait for their turn according to this thing called the visa bulletin and their priority date.
Okay.
And depending what country they're from, the priority date can be like 9 years, 10, 11 years, or whatever. And if their priority date is that long, that means they have to sit in H-1B status and renew their H-1B status, or at least get into H-1B status. And they've run up against the problem of Donald Trump, President Trump, and his attack on the H-1B visa, particularly this issue of premium processing,
All right.
which he's removed. So in other words, what usually took 2 weeks to get an approval on this H-1B visa is now going to take 9 months or 11 months to get approval. And so there are doctors in that article in particular you mentioned.
Yes.
There was a doctor complaining that she's been waiting 8 months and she doesn't have her H-1B visa.
Right.
Yeah.
Just to take it back a step, so from the government's point of view, it's one of these things, killing a fly with a sledgehammer or something like that. From the government's point of view, too many doctors were jumping the queue to the front of the line to get their H-1B visa because companies were paying, I think it was about $1,200 to get them to the front of that line.
Yes.
By removing that fee, now everyone's the same,
Right.
which means now you could be waiting a year for a doctor to get their visa.
Correct.
Okay.
And this was painful, particularly not in the urban centers, but in the rural centers who are short on doctors and need these doctors to, help their populations.
Right. It was fascinating to read, actually. I think it said something like 25% of the doctors practicing in the United States are either foreign-born or came from overseas and were trained in the United States, especially in the rural areas.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So those people that are in that situation, what's the solution?
Well, apart from waiting in this line to get your H-1B visa and then in H-1B status for almost an eternity until you get your green card,
Right.
a possibility would be come to Canada. You can apply to Canada as a doctor. Now, the idea there is that we have this program called Express Entry Federal Skilled Worker Program.
Yes.
The basics are you have a high education, your age is a factor. If you're young, it helps. Your experience, and now in this case, we need at least 1 year's work experience as a doctor, which I think most of these people have. And then you have to have credentials. You have to be able to speak English or French. So you'd have to go through a test. You'd have to have your credentials evaluated by the Medical Council of Canada as part of this process. But the idea is that these doctors could apply for permanent residence, not temporary work permit, but permanent residence in Canada. And the beauty of the program is if you qualify, once you put up your profile, they say that within 6 months, by and large, people who apply under that program will get permanent residence. So the irony is that it might be possible for someone who's waiting in line to get an H-1B visa in the United States, a work visa, could in that same period of time apply in Canada and get permanent resident status.
Exactly. Yeah, like the person we were referring to, a couple of people quoted in the article have been waiting upwards of 9 months to a year. In that 9 months to a year, they could have achieved permanent residency in Canada and been working as doctors here.
Correct. Assuming they had worked for a year, probably in residency there or something like that.
And pass, of course, the credentials in Canada.
Yes.
I have to figure someone who's got their training at the Mayo Clinic or something like that is probably going to pass exams in Canada.
I think by and large, medical credentials will be recognized in Canada.
Right.
So if they've done the two, there's these two national exams, for example, though. Those would be recognized in Canada.
So that's one way to solve the problem for the medical people. And the IT people, same thing?
Something a little different for IT people. If you're working for Cisco, Apple, Microsoft, or any of these huge organizations that have both branches in the United States and in Canada, that organization could send you up as an intercorporate transferee to work in Canada. And you could work on a work permit for 1 year very quickly, like it could be done in a matter of a couple of weeks.
Right.
You could be in Canada working on a work permit. In the meantime, your green card application could be pending in the United States while you do these things, which is you come to Canada as an intercorporate worker for a year and then apply inside Canada under the Canadian Experience class for permanent resident status, again under this express entry system. And presumably, because you'll have a master's degree or whatever, you would qualify and get your permanent residence in Canada. So, in essence, a possible plan could be
Yes.
that you're working in the United States, you want to get your green card, but it's like 12 years away because you're on this priority date issue with the visa bulletin holding you back until such time as you qualify because you're from a country like India or China or wherever, where there's many years of waiting before you get in line to be able to get your green card. So while you're waiting, in theory, you could come to Canada, work for a year, then qualify under the express entry to get permanent resident status, which will take, in theory, 6 months.
Right.
So let's say within a year and 6 months, a year and a half, you would have permanent residence in Canada. And it's conceivable under the new rules of Canadian citizenship where if you're physically present in Canada 3 out of 4 years, that you could even get Canadian citizenship and still be waiting in line for your green card in the United States.
It's a long
and
way.
ultimately return to the United States to become a permanent resident in the green card category.
It sounds like it's a very roundabout way to get and wait for your green card, but it is definitely a possibility. It's fascinating, actually.
Yeah.
That's what it would take.
Put it this way, why not get yourself the security of permanent residence, at least in Canada, while you're waiting?
Right.
Why sit in a lineup and wait on not knowing for sure whether you're going anywhere or not?
Right.
Who wants to wait 10 years to get?
Not to mention, with all the changes going on, if they ever lowered the boom more or completely on the H-1B visa
Yes,
in the years that you are waiting,
yeah, that could be a real problem.
you're not holding your spot in line unless you have that H-1B visa. If
Right.
that thing disappears, it's game over.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's a really dicey situation at the moment, given the political immigration landscape in the United States. So,
Right. Yeah. And I mean, Canada, similarly, I remember we went through this with the foreign worker program,
Yes.
where people didn't know if they were going to get visas. So when you're waiting on government fiat to decide which way your life is going to go, it can be pretty dicey. So
But what we've discussed brings promise to some, at least.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
I think it's worth a try if anybody's interested.
there's always options. Andy's number one when it comes to the solutions. Give him a call. Look him up at Andy at myworkvisa.com or Semotiuk at pacelawfirm.com. If you're on H-1B status and you need answers, he's the man to do it. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.